If you want an example of how denial is affecting things, take the world of investment management.
The problem is the whole thing can't work perfectly forever, but it'll work for a long time. I don't think there is an easy way to handle the problem of doing better and better with finances.
And if you had asked Warren Buffett the same thing that this investment counseling did, give me your best idea this year, and you just followed Warren's best idea, you would find it worked beautifully.
In the financial world's delicate dance, Charlie Munger unveils the harsh truth. Perfection is an unsustainable illusion.
Now, at a place like Berkshire Hathaway or even the Daily Journal, we've done better than average. And now there's a question, why has that happened? Why has that happened? And the answer is pretty simple. We tried to do less. We never had the illusion we could just hire a bunch of bright young people and they would know more than anybody about canned soup and aerospace and utilities and so on and so on and so on. We never had that dream. How many managers are going to beat the indexes, all costs considered? I would say maybe 5% can consistently beat the averages.
Munger's piercing insight reveals that a mere 5% of active investors consistently outperform the averages, leaving others in a state of denial.
In other words, if you get too much faddishness in one sector or in one narrow index, of course you can get catastrophic changes like they had with the Nifty 50 in that former era. I don't see that happening when the index is 3/4 of the whole market.
We never thought we could get really useful information on all subjects, like Jen Kramer tends to have. And we always realized that if we worked very hard, we could find a few things where we were right, and that a few things were enough, and that was a reasonable expectation. That is a very different way to approach the process.
The majority, lost in denial, cling to hefty fees, unaware that their financial maneuvers bring little benefit to their clients.
Everybody else is living in a state of extreme denial. They're used to charging big fees and so forth for stuff that isn't doing their clients any good. It's a deep moral depravity. If some widow comes to you with $500,000 and you charge her 1 point a year and you could put her in the indexes, but you need the 1 point.
JP Morgan talked everybody into buying just 50 stocks. And they didn't care what the price was, they just bought those 50 stocks. And of course, in due time, their own buying forced those 50 stocks up to 60 times earnings, whereupon it broke and everything went down by about 2/3 quite fast.
Facing an unpleasant reality, people resort to mental tricks, deceiving themselves into believing the inconvenient truth isn't unfolding.
But he would, trying to know the whole, he would give you 1 or 2 stocks. He had more limited ambitions. I had a grandfather who was very useful to me, my mother's grandfather, and he was a pioneer, and he came out to Iowa with no money but youth and health, and took it away from the Indians. He fought in the Black Hawk, he was a captain in the Black Hawk, and he stayed there, and he bought cheap land, and he was aggressive and intelligent and so forth, and eventually he was the richest man in the town and owned the bank, and highly regarded in a huge family and a very happy life.
Munger dissects the dilemma of indexes, a modern challenge unheard of in the past, presenting a complex problem for investment professionals.
If I had to name one factor that dominates human bad decisions, it would be what I call denial. If the truth is unpleasant enough, people their mind plays tricks on them and they think it isn't really happening. And of course that causes enormous destruction of business where people go on throwing money into the way they used to do things, even though it isn't going to work at all well in the way the world is now, having changed.
Indexes emerge as the nemesis in Munger's narrative, posing a formidable obstacle for those navigating the intricate world of finance.
The indexes have caused just absolute agony among intelligent investment professionals because basically 95% of the people have almost no chance of beating it over time. And yet a lot of the people expect that if they have some money, they can hire somebody who will let them beat the indexes. And of course, the honest, sensible people know they're selling something they can't quite deliver. And that has to be agony. Most people handle that with denial. They think it'll be better next year, or they just don't want to think about it. And I understand that. I don't really think about my own death either. But it's a terrible problem, beating those indexes. And it's a problem that investment professionals didn't happen in the past. And what's happening, of course, is that the prices for managing really big sums of money are going down, 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 20 basis points and so on. The people who rose in investment management didn't do it by getting paid 20 basis points. But that's where we're going, I think, in terms of people who manage big portfolios of say, American equities and the equivalent of the S&P. So it's a huge, huge problem. And it makes your generation of money managers have way more difficulties and it causes a lot of worry and fretfulness. And I think the people who are worried and fretful are absolutely right.
Echoing the wisdom of his grandfather, Munger imparts invaluable lessons that transcend the complexities of the financial realm.
And so people just charge some widow, a considerable fee for worthless advice. And the whole profession is full of that kind of denial. It's everywhere.
I would hate to manage $1 trillion in the big stocks and try and beat the indexes. I don't think I could do it. In fact, if you look at Berkshire, take out 100 decisions, which is like 2 a year. The success of Berkshire came from 2 decisions a year over 50 years. We're hardly great. We may have beaten the indexes, but we didn't do it by having big portfolios of securities and having subdivisions managing the subdivisions. And so, no, the indexes are a problem for you people. But why shouldn't life be hard? It's what had to happen, what's happened now. If you take these people doing some of those early trading by computer algorithms that worked, then somebody else would come into the same thing with the same algorithm and play the same game, and of course the returns went down. Well, that's what's happening in the whole field, is the returns you're really going to get are being pushed down by the progress of the suns.
Shareholder queries find candid answers in Munger's discourse at the Daily Journal, unraveling insights into the investment landscape.
He had the attitude, having come out to Iowa when the land was not much more than $1 an acre, and having stayed there until that black topsoil created a modern, rich civilization and some of the best land in the world. His attitude was that in a favored life like his, when you were located in the right place, you just got a few opportunities if you lived to be about 90. And the trick in coming out well was seizing a few opportunities that were your fair share that came along when they did. And he told that story over and over again to the grandchildren hung around him all summer. And my mother, who had no interest in money, remembered the story and told it to me. But I'm not my mother's natural imitator. And I knew Grandpa Hingham was right. And so I always knew from the very first when I was a little boy, that the opportunities that were important that were going to come to me were few, and that the trick was to prepare myself for seizing the few that came. This is not the attitude they have at a big investment counseling thing. They think if they study a million things, they can know a million things. And of course, the result is almost nobody can outperform an index. Whereas I sit here with my Daily Journal stock, my Berkshire Hathaway stock, my holdings in Lilu's Asian fund, my Costco stock, and of course I'm outperforming everybody. And I'm 95 years old, and I practically never have a transaction. And the answer is I'm right and they're wrong. And that's why it's worked for me and not for them. And the question is, do you want to be more like me or more like them?
Munger's no-nonsense advice rings clear. Shed your foolish notions swiftly and steer clear of dubious characters to secure success.
So I had to say, I always quote Demosthenes. It was a long time ago, Demosthenes. That's more than 2,000 years ago. And he said, what people wish is what they believe. Think of how much of that goes on. And so of course it's hugely important. And you can just see it. I would say the agency costs in money management, there are just so many billions, it's uncountable. And nobody can face it. Who wants to keep your kids in school? You need the fees, you need the brokerage commissions, you need this or that. So you do what's good for you and bad for them. Now, I don't think Berkshire does that. And I don't think Garen and I did it at the Daily Journal. Garen and I never took a dime in salary or director's fees or anything. And if I have business I talk on my phone or use my car, I don't charge it to the Daily Journal. That's unheard of. It shouldn't be unheard of. And it goes on in Berkshire, and it goes on in the Daily Journal.
Obviously, if you're glued together and honorable and get up every morning and keep doing it and keep learning every day, and you are willing to go in for a lot of deferred gratification all your life, you're going to succeed. It may not be as much as you want, but you're going to succeed. And so the main thing is to just keep in there and be glued together and get rid of your stupidities as fast as you can, and avoid the bad people as much as you can, and you'll do reasonably well. But try teaching that to your grandchildren. I think the only way you got a chance is sort of by example. So if you want to improve your grandchildren, the best way is to fix yourself.
As the discussion deepens, Munger explores the theoretical limits of index funds, pondering if there's a point where their efficacy falters.
We have an incentive plan now in this Journal Technologies, and it has $1 million worth of Daily Journal stock. That did not come from the company issuing those shares. I gave those shares to the company to use in compensating the employees. And I learned that trick, so to speak, from the guy at BYD, which is one of the securities we hold in our securities portfolio. And BYD at one time in its history, the founder chairman, he didn't use the company's stock to reward the executives. He used his own stock. And it was a big reward too. Well, last year, what happened? BYD last year made more than $2 billion after taxes in the auto business in China. Who in the hell makes $2 billion who's a brand new entrant really in the auto business for all practical purposes? It's incredible what's happened. And so there is some of this old-fashioned capitalist virtue left in the Daily Journal, and there's some left in Berkshire Hathaway, and there's some left in BYD. But most places, everybody's trying to take what they need and just rationalizing whether it's deserved or not.
Well, the index funds of the S&P is like 75% of the market. So I don't think the exact problem you're talking about is going to be a big big problem if you're talking about the S&P index. But is there a point where index funds theoretically can't work a course? If everybody bought nothing but index funds, the whole world wouldn't work as people expect. There's also the problem, one of the reasons you buy a big index, like the S&P, is because if you buy a small index and it gets popular, it's a self-defeating situation. When the Nifty 50 were the rage,